Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're going to try something a little different. I want you to kind of fast forward in your mind with me. Let's say it's early 2026. The whole landscape in pharma has, well, it's really shifted. We're not talking about piloting digital tools anymore.
Right, that whole shiny toy phase is long gone.
It's over. The tech is here, it's installed, and, honestly, it's pretty impressive stuff.
It really is. I mean, if you just look at the tech stack that's available in 2026, it is straight out of science fiction compared to just a few years back. We're talking AI that can predict drug target interactions with, frankly, terrifying accuracy.
And things like digital twins simulating entire global supply chains, right, down to the single vial.
Exactly, and IoT sensors on every single piece of manufacturing equipment. The tools are there.
So on paper, this should be a utopia of efficiency. We have all the tools to get drugs to market faster, cheaper than ever, and there's always a but. When you actually look at the scoreboard, it's ugly.
It's surprisingly ugly. The data is showing that despite this incredible toolkit, nearly 70% of digital initiatives in pharma are still failing to deliver on their promised ROI.
70%. That is just a staggering number. I mean, if a drug failed 70% of the time in a late-stage trial, you'd shut down the entire division. So what's going on? Is the AI making things up? Are the sensors broken?
No, and that's the real paradox here. The technology works. It works flawlessly. The algorithms are solid. The failure isn't in the code. It's in the canteen. It's happening in the boardroom. It's what our deep dive is all about. Culture is eating tech for breakfast.
Culture is one of those words that gets thrown around so much it starts to lose its meaning. It sounds like something you fix with a ping pong table, but you're talking about something much more structural.
Oh, much more. Let's dig into a specific case from the source material because it's a perfect example of what I'd call a successful failure. You have this big pharma manufacturer, and they drop $50 million on a cloud-based supply chain platform.
50 million? Okay, that's a serious investment.
Huge. And technically, the thing was a marvel. It gave autonomous recommendations. It had real-time visibility, predictive analytics for shortages. I mean, it was the Ferrari of supply chain software.
Okay, so they bought the Ferrari.
They bought the Ferrari. But 18 months later, utilization was sitting at just 40%.
So everyone's still taking the bus to work. Why?
Well, the simple answer is always training. But the real reason is just human nature. First, the operators on the floor, they didn't trust this black box AI. It would say, move this inventory, but it wouldn't explain why, so they just ignored it.
Okay, that makes some sense.
But the darker reason, and this is where it gets really interesting, is that middle management actively suffocated it.
Wait, hold on. Why would managers kill a tool that's designed to make their job easier?
Because it made their job too transparent. This system was shining a big, bright light on inefficiencies that those managers had been, hiding or working around for years. It threatened their whole narrative of competence.
So if the AI shows that your department is the bottleneck,
the AI becomes a threat to your career, to your mortgage.
That's a fascinating point. We always assume people want to be efficient. But what you're saying is, no, people want to be secure. And if the tech threatens that security, they'll find a way to break it.
Precisely. It was a complete technical success, but a total cultural catastrophe. And that really brings us to the core mission of this deep dive today, which is unpacking this innovation culture pyramid. It's a framework designed to stop this $50 million bleeding.
All right, let's climb that pyramid. If the tech is the roof, what's the foundation? Because clearly just buying the software isn't getting it done.
The absolute foundation, the bedrock, is psychological safety.
Okay, I have to play devil's advocate here. Psychological safety. It sounds great for a creative agency or a tech startup, but we're talking about pharma. This is a heavily regulated life and death industry. We have GXP. Isn't safety just another way of saying low standards?
That is the most common pushback, 100%. We can't be software scientists. But let's look at the data. The sources all point back to Project Aristotle, that famous Google study. They found psychological safety was the #1 predictor of team effectiveness. More important than IQ, more important than technical skill, or even budget.
Okay, fine for Google. But does that really apply when you're manufacturing sterile injectables?
It applies more. The report describes this phenomenon specific to our industry. It calls the invisible fear. In pharma, people are just terrified. They're terrified of the regulator, terrified of a compliance breach, terrified of being the person who delayed a billion-dollar launch.
Which seems kind of rational, right? I mean, I want my drug manufacturers to be afraid of making mistakes.
You want them afraid of carelessness. You absolutely do. But you don't want them afraid of telling the truth. The source makes this chilling observation. The best ideas don't fail because they're weak. They fail because people self-censor before even voicing them.
So if a lab tech sees an anomaly, but they're afraid of getting yelled at for slowing down the timeline, they just stay quiet.
They hide it. And that is incredibly dangerous. Psychological safety isn't about group hugs. It's about having the confidence to pull the emergency brake when you see something is wrong.
Okay, so there's a hard ROI to this then.
A huge one. The research showed that pharma R&D units with a higher tolerance for early-stage failure, meaning people felt safe enough to say, hey, this isn't working, they produced 23% more approved drugs per dollar spent.
Wait, that seems totally backwards. They failed more, but they got more drugs approved.
Because they failed sooner.
Mm.
In a culture of fear, a team will drag a zombie project along for 2 years because nobody wants to be the one to admit it's dead. In a psychologically safe culture, they kill it in 3 months. That saves millions of dollars that can then be redeployed to the projects that are actually going to win.
The efficiency comes from the speed of the kill. I like that.
That's a great way to put it.
This leads us right to the next layer of the pyramid then. Redefining failure. We hear fail fast all the time, but again, in a GXP environment, fail fast sounds like a recipe for a warning letter from the FDA. How do you square that?
You have to make a really clear distinction between what you could call reckless failure and intelligent failure. Reckless failure is deviating from an SOP, violating a regulation. That is never, ever okay.
Right.
But intelligent failure is totally different. It's a well-designed experiment in new territory where the outcome is uncertain.
So give me a concrete example. How do you fail intelligently in a manufacturing plant that's running 24/7?
You use the fail cheaper principle. Let's go back to that $50 million supply chain disaster. The mistake wasn't the idea. It was the big bang rollout. They tried to change everything for everyone all at once.
The classic go big or go home approach.
Which in this case was go big and go home broke. Instead, you should focus on a minimum viable product, an MVP. But, and this is a key insight for you, an MVP in pharma isn't a buggy piece of beta software. You can't release beta drugs.
Please don't. No.
An MVP in pharma means scoping down the application. So instead of a global rollout, you spend, say, $50,000. You take one production line for 8 weeks. You might not even fully integrate the software. Maybe you have a human manually entering data just to test if the algorithm's logic even holds up.
So you're testing the hypothesis, not the entire infrastructure.
Yes. And if it fails, you lost $50,000 in 8 weeks. You didn't lose $50 million and your job.
But I can see the friction point here. Even if you only lose 50,000, in a lot of corporate cultures, that's still a black mark on your record. Oh, that's Bob. He ran that project that went nowhere.
And that's why the third part of this framework is fail forward. You have to actually ritualize the learning. The report talks about companies holding monthly failure shares.
The failure share sounds painful.
It sounds excruciating, doesn't it? Standing up in front of your peers to talk about what went wrong. But the organizations that do this well, they turn it into a badge of honor. They celebrate what they call learning velocity. The whole message from leadership shifts from did you win to did we learn something valuable that stops us from wasting money next time?
I can see how that changes the whole vibe. It turns the expense into an investment in knowledge. Okay, let's shift to structure, because all this cultural stuff is great, but we're still dealing with a massive structural clash here. You've got the agile digital teams running in 2-week sprints.
And then you have the stage gate traditionalists who think in like 10-year cycles.
Exactly, and it feels like a war of the worlds. Agile wants to break things and iterate. StageGate wants to lock everything down and validate.
And usually StageGate wins because they hold the regulatory hammer.
Usually. But the winners in 2026, they're moving to a hybrid model. This is really important. You don't just do Agile everywhere. That would be a compliance disaster. You use Agile for the discovery and prototyping phase.
So when the cost of an error is low.
Exactly. When you're tinkering with an interface or testing a workflow with users. But the moment you move to execution and validation, the second that data could touch a patient or a regulatory filing, you switch back to the rigorous stage gate.
But doesn't that handoff create a huge bottleneck? You sprint, and then you just slam into a brick wall of paperwork.
It used to, but now we're seeing something called iterative validation. The case study mentioned a validation software project where they didn't wait until the very end to document everything. They actually integrated validation steps into the sprints.
So the compliance people are in the room during the sprint planning.
Exactly. They're not the police waiting at the finish line. They are the co-pilots during the flight.
Hmm.
It keeps the regulators happy, but it also keeps the momentum of the software team.
That makes a lot of sense.
Now, I want to touch on something that jumped out at me from the report, this idea of entrepreneurship.
Ah, the internal startup, yes.
It sounds really sexy, but isn't it just a logistical nightmare? Like, hey, take 6 months off your real job to play startup. Who does their work? What happens when it ends? Do they just awkwardly go back to their old desk?
You've hit on exactly how most companies mess this up.
Yeah.
They tell people to be innovative on top of their 60-hour-a-week day job. It just burns people out. The model that's actually working in 2026 is called the tour of duty.
Tour of duty, like in the military.
It's a similar concept. You get guaranteed funding for, say, 6 to 12 months, and you are 100% dedicated to this new idea. You are officially relieved of your other duties.
Okay, so you have focus, but what's the end game?
Well, if the idea works, it gets scaled up, and you might even lead that new division. If it fails, the deal is you have a guaranteed role to return to, but, and this is the crucial part, it might not be your old role. You're expected to bring those new skills back into the broader organization.
It's basically a way to stop your best, most restless talent from quitting to start their own company. You let them scratch that entrepreneurial itch inside the house.
It creates a pipeline of innovation, and it retains your mavericks. Because otherwise, those mavericks leave, they start a competitor, and they disrupt you 3 years later.
Let's move to the very top of the pyramid, the humans, specifically the leaders. Because everything we've just talked about, safety, failure, agile, it all requires an AEO who actually gets it.
The enabler role. And the data here is really harsh. Something like 61% of pharma execs say C-suite alignment is the #1 driver of success. Not the budget, not the tech stack, it's the leadership mindset.
But what does alignment actually look like in practice? Is it just the CEO mentioning AI in the quarterly town hall?
No, that's what we call innovation, Peter. It looks nice, but it's hollow. Real alignment is time. The report suggests leaders need to allocate 10 to 15% of their personal schedule to innovation.
That's a huge ask. A CEO's time is scheduled in 5-minute blocks. You want them spending 4 hours a week just hanging out in a lab.
If they don't, the organization knows they aren't actually serious. They need to show up at the failure shares. They need to be mentoring the entrepreneurs. And more importantly, they need to enforce a whole new set of rules for how decisions get made.
What kind of rules are we talking about?
There's one I absolutely love from the report. Arguing with data is encouraged. Arguing without data is discouraged.
That directly attacks the HIPPO problem, right? The highest paid person's opinion.
It destroys the HIPPO. In a traditional pharma company, the VP's gut feeling can override a junior engineer's spreadsheet. In a truly data-driven culture, if that junior engineer has the data, the VP loses the argument, period.
That requires a very secure VP.
It does, and that brings us full circle right back to psychological safety. If the leaders themselves aren't safe enough to be proven wrong, the whole system just collapses.
There's one more piece to the human puzzle I want to cover, collaboration. We know pharma is notoriously secretive, but the report talks about federated learning.
This is a total game changer for 2026. You're seeing major pharma companies, we're talking direct competitors, collaborating to build drug discovery AI models together.
Wait, hold on. Their lawyers must be having heart attacks. You're telling me Pfizer and Novartis are just swapping proprietary data?
No, and that's the genius of federated learning. They aren't swapping data, they're swapping math.
Okay, break that down for me. How do you learn from data you can't see?
So imagine you have an AI model trained on your proprietary patient data, safe behind your firewall. I have my model trained on my data. We never share the actual patient records. Instead, we share the updates to the model, the weights and biases, the mathematical learnings.
So the central collective model gets smarter from everyone's experience, but the raw data never leaves the building.
Exactly. It's like, imagine we're both learning to cook. I don't give you my secret ingredients, but I tell you, hey, turning the heat up this high burns the sauce. And you tell me adding a pinch of salt really helps. We both end up with a better recipe without ever sharing our grocery lists.
That's a perfect analogy, and the results are that good.
They're undeniable.
Mm-hmm.
The collective model outperforms every single individual company's model. It turns out that in the race to cure complex diseases, isolation is a competitive disadvantage.
Wow. That is a profound shift from protect everything to share the learnings to move us all faster.
It's the only way to tackle the complexity of modern biology.
So, okay, we've built the pyramid. We've got safety, smart failure, hybrid structures, and data-driven leadership. Now, the big question, the so what? If a company actually pulls all of this off, which, let's be honest, is a big if, what's the prize at the end?
The prize is speed and relevance. We are seeing AI reduce drug discovery timelines from an average of 5 years down to 18 months.
That's years of patent life you're getting back. That is billions in revenue.
Billions. We're talking about predictive maintenance cutting manufacturing costs by 30 to 40%. We're talking about digital therapeutics prescription apps becoming a core revenue stream, not just a gimmick.
But the real competitive advantage isn't the software itself, is it? Because, like you said at the top, anyone can buy the software.
That is the final most important takeaway. By 2026, technology is a commodity. If there's a great new AI tool, your competitor will have it next week. You cannot buy a culture. You have to build it, you have to sweat for it, and you have to defend it every single day.
Culture is the moat.
It is the only moat left.
So if I'm a listener and I'm sitting in a pharma office right now, looking at a digital project that's struggling, where do I even begin?
You start with the first 90 days, and you do not buy more software. First, you measure your psychological safety. You survey your teams anonymously. You ask them one simple question. If you saw a project heading for a cliff, would you feel safe enough to speak up?
And if the answer comes back, no.
Then you stop everything else and you fix that. Because no amount of artificial intelligence will ever fix a team that is afraid to tell you the truth.
It's a sobering thought, but it's also, I think, an empowering one. It means the solution is actually within our control.
It is. It's human work, not technical work.
I want to leave our listeners with one final thought to mull over. We talked about that 70% failure rate. We usually associate failure with loud noises, right? Explosions, lawsuits, stock market crashes.
The spectacular failures. Yeah.
Right. But I think what this deep dive suggests is that the real risk isn't the explosion, it's the silence. The biggest risk to your company isn't a failed experiment or a regulatory fine. It's the quiet, invisible fear that stops your best employee from raising their hand in a meeting and saying, I have a crazy idea, or maybe more importantly, I think this is about to go very, very wrong.
The silence is what kills you.
The silence is expensive. On that note, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the paradox of pharma's digital future. We hope you feel a little more psychologically safe to go out there and break some things, intelligently, of course.
Intelligently.
Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next deep dive.